Sarah was feeling very uptight. She hated the rain. It made her feel anxious and full of dread. She even hated the shower, as it reminded her of rain. The feeling of water on her skin might as well have just been sharp glass pouring onto her skin, cutting her. The pain felt the same. Jason was walking down a creepy, dark, lonesome road where the trees were so high and overlapping across the road it was even dark looking in the day. But it wasn't the darkness unsettled him. It was the feeling of the rain dripping off his hair onto his shoulders made him shiver in fear. He ran down the road to get home faster and in out of the rain. Lisa pulled up in her driveway and stepped out of her car. She dreaded making the short few steps in the rain. She knew most people, of course, wouldn't be afraid of getting wet, but every time it rained, she felt petrified. Jack was going for his jog when it suddenly started to rain heavy. He was 10 minutes from his house, so he began to sprint home. He had a huge irrational fear of the rain. He was panting and out of breath by the time he got home, and was relieved once he had his house door shut behind him and he was in from the rain. Mike was finished football practice and startled the other players when he freaked out on the football field. Once a heavy rain shower began, he just lost it. His friends looked, laughing, and one of the boys said, "It's only rain. It's not going to kill you." It was a rainy night, and it was the high school reunion, and everyone was enjoying themselves, except 5 people who were reluctant to even come along at all. Those 5 people were Sarah, Jason, Lisa, Jack, and Mike. They all were called into a room that had a barrel with water in it. Mike stood in the middle, and Martin, the school bully, was sitting on a chair tied to it with a cloth wrapped around his mouth. When everyone was in the room, Mike walked over and locked the door, then turned back to Martin and said, "Do you remember all the times you used to drop us into a barrel of water in the back of the school and at house parties? Where did you even get the water to put in the barrel to torture us? Do you realize the embarrassment and humiliation you put us through?" Mike pulled the cloth from Martin's mouth and he started pleading, "For God's sake, we were just kids. I'm sorry, okay?" Mike and Jack dragged him and held him over the barrel water and lowered him into it. The others looked on in horror, shouting to them pull him out, and that was enough. When Mike and Jack finally pulled him out of the water, they noticed he wasn't breathing. He had drowned to death within the first few seconds in the water. They have never spoken about what had happened on the night of the reunion to anyone outside of that room, and no one suspected them as the body was discovered in the pool the next day, and the police had it down as an accidental drowning. Mike was the one who hid the body and dumped it in the pool when he got a chance. Sarah, Jason, Lisa, Jack, and Mike all took steps towards finding out how to deal with their irrational fear of rain. They didn't realize they all shared the same fear. The doctors and psychiatrists assigned to each person had no clear idea of why they had the fear, and it was made harder for them to not know what had happened to them when they didn't even know what happened during school and during that unforgettable night at the high school reunion. After all, how would anyone know why they had a fear of rain when they did not know what had happened to them and what had happened to me? After all, Who would be able to put everything together that I am haunting my killers each and every time it rains? I was home alone watching horror, and I felt tense as I hated being home alone. So the suspense of the movie added to my anxiety. I don't know why I'm such a crybaby. Maybe I should just not watch scary movies. I got a notification from my phone. It was a Snapchat notification. It was a message. It read, "Check my story." I wondered, who would it be from? As there was no photo on the profile, just black, I scrolled down my Snapchat contacts and viewed their story. I looked closer, squinting my eyes, as it was very dark. I could make out it was some sort of room. I jumped with fright when I realized it was my front door and the story was taken inside my hall. I looked up from the couch where I was sitting into the hall, but could not see anything. I realized the story wouldn't have been live, of course. Maybe it was my boyfriend Jake playing some stupid prank on me, but I still felt dread overcome me and was paralyzed with fear. Whoever this is could still be in my house. I got another notification and almost turned my phone off, but knew that wouldn't change anything if someone was actually in my house. I pressed the button and viewed the snap. This time it was a video. I could see the back of my head and my phone in my hand. Whoever was filming this snap was just behind me and is just behind me now. My heart jumped in my chest and I felt like screaming but couldn't as I was frozen with fear. I suddenly felt a hand touch my shoulder and jumped and screamed. A man walked around with a mask, then took the mask off and he stared right at me. Let me introduce myself. You can call me, Jake. You don't know me, as you were too busy stealing my phone the other day. I followed you home, and that's how I know where you live. I was going to call the police, but decided there would be something more creative I could do. I shouted, "Please, please, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't steal any phone." The man pulled out a phone. "Oh, but you see, you did. I have it all here on camera. Luckily, my good old observant friend caught the whole thing while pretending to be busy texting. He showed me the camera and I felt disgust watching my twin sister kissing my boyfriend. I looked up in fear, hoping he would believe me. That is not me. That is my twin. I looked up in fear, hoping he would believe me. That is not me. That is my twin sister cheating with my goddamn boyfriend. Jake laughed. Do you expect me to believe that? I flicked through my phone and showed him a pic of me and my twin sister Sarah. He looked at it and then back to me. Well, where is your twin sister then? I was shaking with fear. She's at work. She will be home at 12. It was 11:30 now. I said, that bitch was kissing my boyfriend. I'll lead you right to her if you like. Jake smiled again and said, sounds like a plan. But work, wherever that is, well, that's not a place where I can exactly get revenge. I got out my phone and Jake looked at it to see was it his. I knew it wasn't. I'll call her to come straight home. Let me use my home phone. I have no credit. He nodded. Go on then, call her now. I picked up the phone and after a few rings she answered. Please come back home straight after work. I'm in trouble with my project. I need some help. The deadline is tomorrow. It's an emergency. I hung up before any reply. He said to me, it looks like your twin sister is a thief and someone that stole her own twin sister's boyfriend. Wow, that's bad. This bitch will have what's coming to her. I smiled. You can say that again? If I knew about her being with my boyfriend, I would have tracked you down myself to you teach her a lesson. At 12:10, my sister pulled up in the driveway in a car and knocked on the door. I opened it and Jake was standing at the side. My sister walked in and a cop came in behind her. Once I saw the cop, I screamed, "Please, help, help, he's in my house." I admitted to the cop afterwards. It was me that stole Jake's phone, but had to pretend it was my twin sister. I held the mute button down when I made the call to my sister. I spoke certain words, so instead of her hearing, "I'm in trouble with my project, I need some help, the deadline is tomorrow, it's an emergency," she heard, "I'm in trouble, I need help, it's an emergency." I was happy that it worked, pressing mute with certain words, so that is all she heard. And I will never ever steal anything again. I was working at my local pizza place when a delivery order came in from a person with a familiar name. I had finished my shift, so Simon was taking over for me, but I really wanted to deliver this order, so I told Simon I'd deliver it for him. I was feeling sick for so long, and it took me so long to get back to work, but my treatment didn't help me, it just made things worse. A while later, I knocked on the door with the pizza and I wanted to see for certain is it the guy I thought it was. I was right, it was. It took him a while to register who I was, but when he did, he took the pizza and said, "Hey Susie, how are you keeping? It's great you're back to work." I smiled back and said, "Hey Mr. Potter, I'm doing good now, thankfully." He handed me $20 and I was giving him the change of $5, but he said, "Keep the change." The door shut and I walked back to the car. Mr. Potter sat down to eat his pizza and felt hungry after a long hard day's work when suddenly the light went out. He said damn and wondered where his flashlight was. Mr. Potter walked into his room to fetch it when someone came up behind him and stuck a needle in his neck and he collapsed. He didn't know how long he was out, but when he came around, he was sitting on a chair with loads of electric wires around him, and there was a flashlight blinding his eyes. Susie was staring right at him. "You sure loved to use electricity on me, didn't you?" He said, "Susie, what are you doing?" She took a wig off, showing her bald head. "Mr. Potter, I am going to flick the kill switch back on in just a few minutes, and you are going to fry alive with those electric wires that are tied onto you. That, I must add, I doubt you will be able to wiggle free with your hands tied behind your back. I learned all that from you. I must admit, this tonight has been the best therapy I've ever had." He started screaming as I walked down to the basement and flicked the kill switch to on. I could hear buzzing and the screaming stopped. My name is Jason. It was a cold, damp morning, and I was walking to school. I was running late, and I didn't want to get any trouble of my teacher, so I picked up pace as I walked down the street towards my school. I got a start when suddenly an elderly woman walked up to me and gave me a strange look. I looked at her, wondering what she wanted. She spoke. "Hey there, young man. Don't look so afraid. I was wondering, did you see my handbag anywhere? I must have dropped it along this pathway." I looked along the footpath, in front and back, and said to her, "I'm sorry, I haven't come across any bag, but I hope you find it." She gave me another strange look, then said, "Okay, thanks for your help." I told the lady, "No problem." Suddenly, an elderly man appeared in front of me. He gave me another strange look. "Hello, I was just going to ask you, did you by any chance come across a stray dog? My eager beaver escaped the leash." I found it strange, as I couldn't see the man carrying any leash. I said, "No, I'm sorry, sir, I haven't come across any dog." The man said, "Are you sure?" I replied, feeling anxious that the man was so intense looking. "Yes, sorry, sir, I'm sure." I was about to go when the man said, "Why are you in such a hurry?" I told him I was in a rush to school. The man looked towards my school, then moved his head close to me and said in a weird voice, "Be careful. We tried to meet you sooner, but we couldn't cross over." I wondered what he meant by that. He walked past me, and I was too stunned to say anything. As I approached my school, I could smell smoke and fire, and all the kids and teachers were running out screaming it was an accident in the kitchen, apparently, and the whole place was ruined. Lots of kids and teachers suffered very bad injuries and third-degree burns. Luckily, no one was killed. I was watching TV on the couch, and my dad was on his laptop. He smiled at me and said, "Hey, look at this. I finally have a photo of your great-grandparents from all my hard work tracing our family tree. And would you believe your great-grandma was a psychic?" When Dad showed me the screen, I froze in fear when I saw that my great-grandparents were the man and woman who delayed me going to school. It all hit me now. My grandma was psychic and knew the school would be ruined by a fire. They were delaying me to save my life. It all made sense now. When Granddad said we tried to meet you sooner, but we couldn't cross over. They saved me, but tried to save everyone from getting injured. But they could not move their spirit over from the other side on time. My name is Jake. I just arrived in my late grandfather's cabin. I usually stay here during the summer. I was ready to have a relaxing weekend when I heard a knock on the door. It was an elderly man who introduced himself as Sam. He looked aggressive. "Hello, Sam. Can I help you with something?" He spoke. "Something very bad happened in this cabin." I asked him, "What do you mean? What happened in this cabin?" He stepped into the cabin and I got a start as I hadn't invited him in. He spoke in a very weird tone. "Oh, something very bad indeed. There was a man murdered in this cabin." I was shocked with the accusation he was making, but more shocked wondering was it true. I asked him, did he want some tea, but he declined. He walked out of the cabin, but before he shut the door, I said, "Wait, who was murdered in this cabin, and when?" He pointed down to the basement door and said, "Down there you'll find the body." As soon as the door was shut, I ran to the door and put the basement light on and walked down the stairs. I saw a body lying in blood and jumped in shock. My heart started thumping in my chest and I felt like getting sick. I took out my phone right away and rang 911 and gave the address. A few minutes later, a police officer arrived. The police officer found a VHS next to a TV by the body. It had "Watch Me" written on it. He put it into the VCR and it played. It showed my grandfather having an argument with someone, but the sound wasn't on, so you could just tell he was arguing by his body language. He backed away next to a mirror and was shot. Blood splattered all over the mirror. The cop looked in shock as he saw the figure who shot him come into the screen. I started talking to the strange man called Sam as he walked down the stairs, shouting at me. I shouted, "Stop! Stop shouting at me!" The cop stared at me in bewilderment and said, "Who are you talking to? Nobody is here." He looked around. I watched the TV screen as I came into view after killing my grandfather. The cop happened to turn around and see me in the screen with a gun in my hand. I spoke in Sam's voice. "I told you something bad happened," as I grabbed the knife from my pocket and stabbed the cop. Over and over and over, I ejected the VHS from the machine and stepped on it over and over, then walked up from the basement. I sat down wondering what happened, and what did that weird guy Sam call for. Then I had a conversation with Sam. Marie broke up with her boyfriend, Jason, a month ago and has been single since. She misses the company, going out, having a coffee or having a meal. She found it hard to meet people, and her friends were praising the dating app Tinder. Some even said they met amazing people through the app. Her best friend Sarah is with her boyfriend of 6 months, and they met on Tinder, so she decided to give it a go. She set up a date through Tinder in a local bar where they had a few drinks. Her date was a man in his early 20s called Sam. He had a really good job and she found him dreamy looking, and he seemed to tick all the boxes for her type of guy. There was a guy playing pool next to them, and Marie found it strange what happened. The guy accidentally hit Sam. He turned around to apologize and said, "Oh, sorry, buddy." Sam didn't answer, just gave him a cold, nasty look. Marie found it very, very strange indeed, but overlooked it. After the drinks, Sam asked Marie would she like a drive home, and she knew he only drank coffee in the bar, so there was no reason to refuse. Plus, it was a half-hour walk to her house and she felt very tired. She said that would be great, and they both walked out into Sam's car. When they arrived at Marie's house, they walked up to her door and Marie said, "Thanks." Sam was hoping she'd ask him in, and he felt relief when she said, "Would you like to come in for another coffee?" "Sure," he said. When Marie shut the door, she turned to kiss Sam, and all of a sudden, a man bolted for Sam, knocking him to the ground. Marie screamed in terror, and then realized the man who knocked Sam to the ground was her ex-boyfriend, Jason. She knew he was the jealous type, but never expected him to attack the next guy she met. She shouted at him to stop. Jason suddenly grabbed a gun out of his pocket and shot Sam in the shoulder. Sam fell, holding his shoulder, crying in pain. Marie was trembling in fear with her crazy ex-boyfriend in front of her, holding a gun. He said, "Don't move!" Suddenly, Sam pointed a gun right at Jason and shot him in the head. Marie cried hysterically, knowing her ex-boyfriend was just killed before her eyes, but knew if it wasn't him, he would have shot her. Jason looked up at her and said, "Don't worry, it was self-defense." Then she heard movement behind her and turned around to see a large man staring straight at her. It suddenly hit her that her boyfriend wasn't telling her not to move, but he was telling the man behind her not to move to save her. Fear and dread rushed through her, knowing she was alone with two men who would no doubt kill her. Suddenly the door burst open, knocking the guy in front of Marie, and Sam lifted the gun, shouting, "Get back or I'll shoot." It was the man from the bar playing pool. He ducked and rammed right into Sam, then lifted his fist and punched him so hard he knocked him out. He then grabbed the gun, pointing it at the other man, and shouted, "You move one muscle and I'll shoot your head off." Marie had already rang the police. The man introduced himself to Marie after the police arrived and told her, after explaining to the police, he knew there was something off about the guy and knew something was up when he left a note on the table. He walked over and gave a glance just before a man could pick it up, and it had written on it, "Follow us, I'm going to her house." So he followed them to see what was going on. Marie was thanking her lucky stars, how lucky she was that the man whose name was Tom was observant enough to spot something very sinister was going on. She worried what could have happened to her if he didn't save her, and she promised herself she'd never ever date anyone through Tinder or anyone online again. I was sitting on my own on a dark night, waiting for the bus. It was past midnight, and I wasn't living in exactly what you'd call a safe neighborhood, so I was a bit tense. I noticed some movement from up the street and gave a quick glance. I don't know how many, and I don't want to appear too nosy, so just sit down and look right in front of me. There was a man and a woman who stood right in front of me. I didn't need to even turn my head to notice, as they were there right in front of me. The man seemed to have been holding up a woman. More than likely she was drunk. I didn't make a sound. Suddenly my phone rang. I wasn't in the mood to answer, so I just let it ring out. The man shouted, "Who's there?" It had then occurred to me that the man was blind and didn't realize I was there until my phone rang. I spoke, "I'm just waiting for the bus." Suddenly I could see blood pouring from the woman and realized that the man was holding a knife. I froze in horror and got up and ran all the way home, which was a mile. There wasn't a second passed that I didn't think the man was going to jump up on me. Even though he was blind and it would be virtually impossible to him catch me, I didn't get the bus for a few weeks. I was so scared. I walked a mile to work and from work. But after a few weeks, I plucked up the courage to get the bus again. I was waiting once again at midnight, and there was a person in a trench coat standing next to me. My phone rang. Suddenly, the man in the trench coat grabbed me, shouting, "I knew I'd hear your ringtone again." I regretted having such a unique ringtone, realizing that the man who was choking me had been the blind man that night who realized I was there after hearing my ringtone, and he knew that I was the same person after hearing it again.
My name is Jason. I am an exterminator. For a few years now, I set up my pest control company, and thankfully I am getting lots of work getting rid of mice, rats, bugs, etc. I just had a big job in an old house that was infested with rats. It took a whole 2 days to rid the place of them, but the owners were thrilled with the results. I'm relaxing for the weekend with a glass of wine watching TV. All of a sudden I felt very itchy. I don't know why, as I just had a shower. I was trying to go to sleep that night but felt it impossible with the itch. I couldn't take it anymore, so got up and had another shower. When I got back to bed, I had eventually fell asleep. When I woke up, I was sweating and looked at my body. There were sore red blisters all over. I heard a knock on the door and got dressed fast and ran downstairs and opened it. My best friend Jimmy said to me, "Wow, you look like you've had a rough night." I said to him, "You can say that again." I looked in a mirror across in the hall and could see rats crawling up me and lots of bugs. I looked down at my hands and they were covered in bugs. I screamed and my best friend shouted, "What's wrong? What are you shouting at?" There were more and more rats crawling around my room and other sorts of bugs. My friend didn't seem to see any of them, as he kept asking, "What's wrong?" I shouted, "These rats, these bugs," but he just said, "What rats? What bugs?" I heard a ringing in my ear, as if the rats and the bugs were trying to make me crazy. Then the noise became jumbled words, as if they were trying to communicate with me. Finally I heard the message they were trying to send. The bugs and rats you killed, or the itch you feel, because the bugs and rats you killed are haunting you. My name is Simon. I have a story to tell you about my experience when visiting a vintage store. I was always curious about items that could be picked up at those type of stores and about the history behind them. But one particular day, something really took my interest in a huge way. It didn't look anything special, just an old style telephone, which I'm sure many houses still had the original style, or many had retro style phones designed in the same style. But it wasn't the look that sparked my interest in this phone, it was what the man behind the counter told me. He said to me, "Hey there, I see you looking at that telephone. Let me tell you a little story behind it. You might have often heard of the Amityville Horror or Poltergeist movies. Well, this phone is from a haunted house just like that. This phone was handed in just over a week ago. Apparently, the owner said they were using it as their home phone, but say it's possessed by some demon. They didn't go into detail, but told me I could burn it or throw it away if I liked. I still don't know why they didn't burn it themselves, but anyway, I knew with a story like that behind it, and if people knew about the haunting, some of these paranormal ghost hunter folk would pay top dollar for it. I have newspaper clippings about the house. I cut the man off, afraid he would keep me an hour talking about it. How much is the phone, sir? The man rubbed his chin and said, let's say $100. How about that? $100? Wow, that's a lot. The man said, like I said, there's a lot of paranormal folk out there that would pay top dollar for it. I was working all summer and had a few $100s saved, and the phone really stood out to me. Plus, I was really intrigued with those type of paranormal stories, and I guessed I couldn't get better than this, so handed him over $100. He smiled and said, "Thanks, young man, and remember, be careful with this thing. The owners don't want nothing to do with it because of all sorts of evil demons they say harness energy through it." I smiled and thanked the man, knowing what he said sounded cool to me, not something that would scare me. A few days later, I had it hooked up to my room instead of my old telephone that used to be there. I told a few of my friends in school, and they all told me I was crazy to spend money on a silly phone that was meant to be possessed. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until one night I was home alone. The phone rang and someone spoke. "Hello, I have a telegram for you. I am just wondering, do I have the right address?" I knew telegrams weren't around for years, but I remember my grandparents talking about them. I didn't pay much attention, but they said my name, so I just said yes. Also, I wondered why anyone was delivering a message to the house at night. I didn't pay much attention to it until 10 minutes later there was a knock on the door, and the boy, dressed in old-style clothes like something out of the 19th century, handed me a box. I took it, wondering what it was. Before I could open it, the phone rang again. This time it was different. It was like there were wires crossed, and I was listening in on a conversation. I could hear two people speaking to each other, and no matter how loud I said hello, they didn't hear me. I listened to hear what they were saying. One man said, "It's all sorted. The delivery was made to his house. We know it is Simon's house." And better again, he answered the door. My heart nearly jumped into my throat when I heard what they said next. "I will be going to his house right now to kill him as ordered." I threw the phone from my hand, not knowing what to do. I was just about to call the police when there was a knock on the door. I jumped with panic. Maybe it isn't them, I hoped. I slowly walked downstairs to peep out the door to see who was standing outside. It was a person wearing a ski mask. I ran upstairs to grab my father's gun to protect myself as the door opened. How did they know where the hiding spot outside for the spare key was? The person walked into the hall, holding the gun right at me. And I panicked and held up my dad's gun and shot the person dead before they shot me. Then after the gunshot, I didn't understand what had happened. My friends walked in and saw the blood and the person I had shot. One of them checked his pulse, shouting, "Oh my God, he's dead." I shouted, "What is this? What's going on?" It turned out my friends were just playing a prank on me over that stupid phone I was telling them about. I am now writing this letter from inside a prison cell where I am serving time waiting for a verdict in the court trial where I am pleading self-defense. I keep asking myself, did the phone have the power to make my friends play that stupid prank? Or was it their own idea?